Well, Teen is definitely not and Rio is definitely. What's going on, Marvelites? Today we are talking about Agatha All Along, episode 4, titled If I Can't Reach You, Let My Song Teach You. And this episode has so many reveals and confirms a lot of major theories that people have been having. But before we get into those major theories, I just want to say I still think this show is one of the best MCU shows that they have made to date. One, the actors are clearly having a ton of fun together. If you couldn't tell that they were enjoying like being a rock band in this episode, especially Patti LuPone, who one changed her instrument every time it went from her to someone else and then back to her, was absolutely amazing. The other thing that I think makes this show so good and so different, especially from just like almost really honestly any TV show on right now, are the practical sets and the practical effects that they are using. The fact that the entire set is all made, right? Like the leaves have changed colors. Like in this episode, they changed to that kind of like burnt red, orange to kind of represent fire from blue last time. And even some of the trees / exposed roots kind of had a red glow to them as opposed to last time, again, which was blue. And just the effects that they're doing with like cameras in this one with the like rotation where they first saw the house down the road and then Alice was like, no, we are not going into that house. She walks away. The way they make that huge revolution around the actors was absolutely incredible. And then some of the stuff that we saw kind of akin to old school horror films, like a lot of zoom ins on like Patty at one point and just like the split screen. And then even just their like sets are absolutely amazing. Like this whole set looked like it was like out of the Brady Bunch for me. But in this episode, we've got some major reveals, some confirmations of theories, pretty much confirmations, we'll say that. The first one really relating to the title of this episode, which we learn is Alice's mom's version, some lyrics that she added into the ballad, which has made it the most famous version of the ballad. It's been kind of hinted that there was a generational curse that killed her grandmother, and then that obviously killed her mother, which Alice could not stop that fire from happening. And then we even learned that Alice had those burn marks that we saw Jen and Lilia get from the curse and the demon hurting them during this episode. We learned that Alice had the same thing happen to her, and she's just kind of felt like she was the one to blame for her mother dying and why she's hated the ballad this whole time. But we really learned that it was a protection curse from her mom, again, relating to those lyrics of the title, If I Can't Reach You, Let My Song Teach You. It was such a hit that it's always been playing that it would always protect Alice. Like someone would always be singing it or it would always be playing somewhere, therefore Alice would always be protected, which being a parent myself, I think is like so heartwarming and heartfelt, right? Like you would do anything to protect your child, which we'll talk about some stuff that Agatha shows in this episode as well, and we'll get to that in a second. Now we learn all of this regarding Alice during that trial, and then afterwards when Alice, Jen, Lilia, and even Rio are sitting down and kind of bonding, and we learn a little bit more about Jen and how she got bound, sort of. So we learn that Jen was or is a midwife, and she went to, I believe it was the Greater Boston Obstetrics Association or something along those lines to kind of, I guess, impart her knowledge of what she knew in regards to midwifery. And that gives us back to that doctor that we saw in episode 3 who tried to drown her and said that Jen was a woman of inconvenience or something along those lines. That's really all we know, and even Jen says that she doesn't know how he bound her. So I do think we're going to get more into her backstory and how that actually happened. What is interesting, or my thought or theory, is that that doctor that we saw in episode 3 was basically, he is essentially someone who hates witches, and he knew that Jen was a witch and he lured her in to, you know, this thing that he was running potentially. My guess is that he would have had to have used magic of some sort to bound a witch, would be my guess, which is again kind of ironic that he hates witchcraft but needed to use it to stop something that he wanted to stop. I don't know. People are confusing. I do think we learned a little bit more about Lilia, not necessarily her past, but there's something that's clearly bothering her in regards to misconceptions about witches. She brings it up again that people believe that they talk to goats and all these other things, which that goat thing is interesting because Madison talk to a goat in She-Hulk. And again, she went to some demonic dimension, and we know that Mephisto has been posed as a goat in the comics. Just saying. I still don't think Mephisto is going to actually show up. I think they just said his name to placate us. But I do think these like pop cultural references that she's talking about and misconceptions will show up during her trial. Speaking of Lilia, we get some more of her outbursts within this episode, one of which is, well, what is it? Am I wispy or am I kooky? Something along those lines. And then on my rewatch of this episode, I believe there's a more subtle one that I didn't necessarily catch the first time, or I didn't really see it or think of it that way. And I'm not sure too many other people have noticed it either, at least I haven't seen online, most people talking about it. When they are in this kind of like circle and they're bonding, Lilia is talking during this time and she says, you know, at the beginning we really hated each other, but now, and then she just stops. And then Jen interrupts her or like continues, but now what, Lilia? And then Lilia just goes, huh? Which is what she normally does after she has those outbursts. Now, the really big heavy hitters in terms of like reveals, theories confirmed, Agatha clearly believes that Teen is Nicholas Scratch. She definitely believes that it is her son. When we see Teen get hit by the demon, or the demon pushes Teen through kind of that studio window, Agatha, you could just see the look on her face. It's just like total motherly instinct took over and was like, we have to go after him, we have to make sure he's okay, right? And then after they finish the trial and they're on the witch's road again, and we learn that Teen, you know, still had a piece of glass stuck in his abdomen and has just been bleeding out slowly and is maybe about to die. So you can see her concern as she's like trying to figure it out. And she looked at Rio and was just like, don't. And she said it in that like tone of voice. We kind of know earlier from the episode that Rio is looking for some extra bodies, and we'll talk more about Rio at the end. There's gonna be non-spoilery stuff after this Agatha section, and then more spoilery stuff at the end. Biggest thing is earlier too, we learned that Agatha had planned that Rio was going to be on the road with her, because during their little conversation in that like sound engineering room, Agatha was like, you're too early. Rio also reveals that she's looking for some bodies. Now, I think this, again, leads us to who she actually is in terms of a character. You know, she kind of has like a demonic voice when she says that she's not a Green Witch, she's the Green Witch. That was terrible. I apologize. The other big reveal in regards to Agatha and kind of Rio, we learned that Agatha supposedly has gone down the witch's road. It's been kind of thought or theorized that Agatha has actually never been down the witch's road and has just been lying that she has. But now we learn that she's been down the witch's road, potentially, again, if she's not lying, and has only gone with one other witch. Now, we learn that for Rio and her background, that she has a scar. When they were all kind of revealing scars, she has a scar. You know, she did something bad to a loved one. I definitely think with kind of her like back and forth side eyes between her and Agatha, that is pretty clearly evident. And again, with the sexual tension that we saw in episode 1 and even more in this episode, that's who it was. And my guess is either that Rio was the one who came out of the witch's road the first time with Agatha, and they maybe made a bond together, which is why they can't kill each other. But Rio eventually ended up killing all the other witches within Agatha's coven to get onto the road, and even though she didn't want to. But my other theory is that Rio killed Agatha's son, Nicholas Scratch, in exchange for the Darkhold. And even though that Rio didn't want to do it, she did it because it was her job. That reveals a little bit more about who she is and kind of ruined her relationship with Agatha. We then later learn in that last exchange at the end of the episode between Agatha and Rio, a confirmed theory here that Teen is definitely not Nicholas Scratch. Again, that's a major confirmation of theories of who Teen could be. I'm still in the camp that Teen is Billy Kaplan, aka Wiccan. My thought is that there still is a possibility that I think that he is, even though he is Billy Kaplan, and technically Billy Maximoff is reincarnated within Billy Kaplan's body, but I do think that Billy Kaplan, Teen, is potentially being possessed by Nicholas Scratch. That is still a possibility, unless Rio is lying, which is a real possibility because that's built into her character. Speaking of her character, we're going to talk about who she is. Spoilers ahead about Rio's actual character. It has been confirmed via a Funko Pop character character that Rio is Lady Death. This all adds up to some theories just with the costumes that Rio has been wearing, especially in that hooded costume, which we saw her in episode 1 wear, and then we see her wear that when they enter the house in this episode. And that all relates back to that tarot card in the promotional material that we saw for this show. And that also makes more sense of, you know, she wants those bodies. That's kind of like what she does essentially. Also goes back to why Agatha looked at her and said, don't, because Teen was clearly being close to death. And you can see that Rio was like, ooh, I get a body. Agatha looked at her because she knew or knows who Rio is, being Lady Death, and was like, don't you take him just yet. And I think that is also partially why Rio at the end kind of like wanted to tell Agatha, it was like, look, that's not your son. So if he dies, he died. Like, you know, he could have died and everything would have been fine. If you want to learn more about Lady Death, you can go ahead and check this video out. And if you've made it this far in the video, one, I truly appreciate you sticking around this long. If you want to be part of a great Marvel community, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below. And until the next video, Excelsior.